Hello, welcome everyone for this webinar. Today I'll be joined with Jack, and we'll be talking about geopolitics and sovereignty on energy projects. Jack?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Also, good afternoon to our Evolen and IVS colleague to whom the webinar is open today. We will be attending these two events. So IVS will be already next week. So in Bergamo, you will have the pleasure to see Jean and Jean-Charles. Myself, I will not be in Bergamo. I will be in the Netherlands. So if you are in the Netherlands next week, don't hesitate to leave me a text. I will be there and happy to share a bit of time with you. In a month from now, there will be the Evolen cocktail. And here again, we will attend. It will be on the 17th of June.
June. Yeah.
Before we start, just a quick reminder to explain what we do for those who don't know would not know us already. So we are tracking projects in energy from pre-FEED to late EPC, and we are gathering all this information within our database that we call Project Smart Explorer. And you will see during this webinar of today, some information are coming from our solution. So you will be able to see some of these figures. The second pillar is also to bring the additional support. What we are doing today, the webinar is part of that. It's part of the support that we'll bring on top of the data. We also have dedicated session with all of you that we call the workshop. And as you know, if you have any question at any time, you can always hit the hotline button. And basically in front of you, you have the hotline support because it's either Jean, either myself, or sometimes Jean-Charles that is answering all the questions. So don't hesitate to join us. The last pillar is obviously our network because we are evolving in a people business. So every subscriber to our services are invited to our energy clubs that we do once a year per country. Let's start with the agenda of today. So we'll have mostly 4 chapters. The first one will be done by Jean, and we will have a vision of geopolitics and the business and what it means for the projects. And then we will see what are the impacts of this situation for the supply chain and what does it mean in terms of projects. And we will conclude with trying to see what potentially is happening after all these crises that we are currently going through and what are the next ones. If you have any question at any time, don't hesitate to ask. You can address them at any time in the chat. We will answer them at the end of the webinar. And if you have some chatbot, please deactivate them because we will systematically kick them out. And sometimes it's happened that the owner of the chatbot is also kicked out. So in order to avoid this bad manipulation, please deactivate your chatbot so we stay in between humans. Jean, I think we can start, and the floor is yours for this first chapter of today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jack, for this introduction and agenda. And today, I mean, the goal is pretty ambitious, to be honest. And we wanted, I would say, given the situation globally, to enlighten the fact that more and more of our business and energy project is motivated by geopolitics. And we wanted to put figures behind how much project is done for political reason, geopolitical reason, and how much is still done for business. And as you will see, it's not quite clear, and the balance is a little bit unclear as well. But if we stick to, I would say, what is easy, what we've been used for decades, meaning the business motivation to do project. If we were in a perfect business environment, we'll only do energy project for 2 parts. First, to match, I would say, the energy demand, okay? Because if there is energy demand, there would be energy project, and also project, I would say, down to the supply chain, for example, refineries project, if of course energy is going up, but also the demand for petrochem is going up. So clearly the mechanism is quite simple. There is an energy growth in energy demand, and there is investment to match with this demand. If we look at all the forecasts today of energy demand, what is quite clear is that we are on a trajectory which is increasing year to year, the demand of energy in total, and the growth rate is if we look at the horizon of 2050, is about 1.7% of the total demand that is growing every year. Really depending on the price of energy, and also today, and that will be our next webinar, the demand of energy coming from artificial intelligence, this growth can go up to 2.5% per year, which is quite a lot when you know how much volume of energy we consume every year. So it's not, I would say, revolution, but it's still a big evolution. And there is two levels of investment which are needed to match with those energy projection. First, you need to make new projects to compensate the one which are arriving to the end of their life cycle. It's quite easy to understand if we look at oil and gas, for example. You have a lot of fields of oil and gas which are getting shut down every year because they are getting empty. And of course, if you want to have a stable level of energy, it means that every year, those fields that are getting empty or less productive, you need to compensate them. So that's really the first level of investment, I would say, to produce energy. You need to maintain the level. And as we are saying, the energy demand going up, you need to put another layer of investment, which is additional project to increase the volume of energy which is getting produced or consumed. And that's where it gets interesting, because if we look at the period from past decade, 2010, 2019, and we look and we take it as a base model for the period 2025, 2050, we can estimate, extrapolate that the demand of energy only, and the growth of demand on energy will call for, I would say, 270 billions of investment per year just to maintain the volume of energy, and an additional 70 billions per year just to, I would say, upgrade, increase this volume. So that's a grand total year to year for the next 25 years, more or less, of 340 billions of US dollar, which are going to be, I would say, invested on the market just to, I would say, match the volume of energy that is needed and demanded by the market. So here, the first part, which is quite big already, are really projects that we were used to, I would say, before COVID, of projects done for energy reasons. Now, if we look the other side, projects done for geopolitical reasons, we have different segments. There were a first wave of those kind of projects in 2020, I would say after the COVID period, when all the governments, I would say, started to be really more serious about energy transition and starting to put a lot of money into this energy transition. Inside this energy transition, you have two parts, I would say, which are really important. You have renewable energy, meaning solar and windmill project, which participate to the production of energy. So all the investment that we see in those fields can be done for, I would say, an energy purpose. So they are not really a geopolitical choice. But if you look at all the other application of energy transition, especially carbon capture, e-fuel, SAF, biofuel, electrification of project, all those type of application are clearly motivated by political decision, because it's government in most of the cases which are deciding to, I would say, decarbonate themselves, to reduce their carbon footprint, trying to, I would say, align themselves with the Paris Climate Agreement. So a lot of projects which are done, I would say, for political decision, political guidance, I would say, which are done for, I would say, the good of our planet. And if we look at this volume of project, is starting to be quite a lot, because on left we extracted those investment year to year, I would say, according to four categories: decarbonation, alternative fuel, and electrification. And you see that in 2025, we reached a plateau of 120 billions US dollar per year, which is quite massive, quite a lot. You see that for 2026, 2027, the forecast is getting a little bit higher, around 180 billions per year, knowing that not all of those projects will materialize. Some of them will be cancelled, some of them will be delayed or postponed. So I think a good benchmark of this segment of market would be to say, okay, we're arriving to 120, maybe a little bit more than that, billions per year, which are invested for political reasons, for decarbonation, for energy transition. And it's quite a lot. If it goes down on our graph, it doesn't mean that this market is collapsing, just reflect the vision we have as of today on those projects. But here we have already one big piece of, I would say, investment, which are made for, I would say, political decision or geopolitical decision. The second wave of geopolitical project were, of course, I would say a result of the Ukrainian war. Of course, in 2022, when the war started between Ukraine and Russia, especially in Europe, a lot of energy had to be shifted. Okay, so Europe had to shift its, I would say, source and supply of energy outside of Russia, but on the other way around, Russia had also to shift its supply to other countries, especially to China and India, that have been, I would say, refurbishing their infrastructure to be able to welcome this kind of oil. And the result of this war was to see an increase in midstream projects. Okay, that was really the first result. And when we look, and here again we exported few figures for terminals just in Europe from Project Smart Explorer, and you see the volume of investment in terminals has been growing since 2022 because decisions started to be implemented in 2024 and starting now also to get into phase two. So we doubled more or less investment in terminals every year in Europe. But of course, if you look globally, all those investments in pipeline, infrastructure, tankers, etc., is weighting about 20 billions additional per year. Another part, which was also a little bit indirect, was a lot of investment in African projects. Because, of course, the supply that was made in Russia had to be replaced somehow. And a lot of investment, which were supposed to happen in Russia already, I would say, in operation in Russia, has been transferred to the continent, the African continent. And here, if we look the situation of profile of investment of Africa before and after Ukraine, there is a clear growth, and this growth is weighting today about 25 billion per year. Okay, if you see companies like Total Energy, which can be a good example, I would say they were a huge producer of natural gas in Russia, and those are starting also additional gas projects in Africa to, I would say, compensate on the same contract sometime all the supply which is not getting made in Russia anymore. So if you combine both effects directly, I would say trying to rearrange all the distribution system, but also the losses of opportunity that had to be made in other places, you end up with a situation that triggered about 45 billion per year trying to replace this situation, which is of course coming on top of all the existing one. A third wave of geopolitical project that happened 2 years later, so in 2024, was the election of Trump. Not so much of a crisis, I would say, as per the last one and the next one that we are going to see. But clearly, as soon as Trump was elected as president, everybody has witnessed a shift in terms of energy policy. First, because he stopped all the public, I would say, funding for energy transition projects, windmill, carbon capture, etc. But it also kind of put a roadway for all the petroleum project, especially LNG project, to be done and to be done on fast track. And of course, operators in US, especially independents, are rushing to do their LNG project because they know that as soon as Trump will be, I would say, in the White House, they can operate, they can get license. If during next election the president change, not sure if they will be able to still, I would say, do all their projects. So there is a huge rush to do LNG projects, and those projects are motivated because they have the opportunity to do it, but also because US is pushing Europe and also has pushed China to sign energy deal to supply US energy to those countries, and of course it's creating a market. So if we compare, and once again, we use figures from Project Smart Explorer, the profile of investment of LNG just in US, you see that the period, I would say 2020 to 2024 compared to the period we're going to witness now from 2025 to 2028, we have a huge, I would say, increase in terms of investment to the range of 50 billions we are going to arrive next year, which is quite massive, and which are projects which are, I would say, completely triggered by, I would say, if you are an energy investor, by a positive environment of investment, which is, of course, calling for a lot of projects. And the fourth wave, sorry, of geopolitics is the one we are still in right now, which is Middle East. On the right, we listed all the assets which have been damaged. And here, of course, you can be sure that as soon as situation will stabilize, and it's already the case, there will be a huge motivation for all the countries which have been suffering damage to repair all those equipment, all those assets which were in operation, and knowing that already if you start to account for, I would say, the budget of what has been needed to be repaired in emergency, plus all the projects that will be done on top of that to, I would say, secure a little bit your supply outside of the Strait of Hormuz, we are already counting about 60 billions of US dollars that needs to be put on the table to be sure that, okay, we are going to mitigate this crisis again. So it's a lot of crises, and if you start to I would say, wait, what is business, what is geopolitics? We are in this situation where today we have business projects for about 340 billions, which are still being done every year, which is quite massive. But on the other side, all those geopolitical adaptation, I would say, situation are driving 275 billion of project. And to be honest, if you compare our world today compared to 10 years ago, this is pure addition of investment, which were not, I would say, made only for energy purpose, but are made for sovereignty, political reason, geopolitical reason, and sovereignty and security. So it's a brand new market, which is happening to come on parallel of the existing business, which is, of course, sometimes starting to get a little bit attention because, of course, it's the same supply chain which is doing all the work. And Jack, I leave you the floor to detail a little bit the situation on the supply chain.
Thanks, Jean. Let's look now what it means for the supply chain. And the first thing that we did, we extracted at CapEx level the business request, let's say the business forecast. So here, that's a number that we extracted from Project Smart Explorer. And the first thing that we see, as before, if it's collapsing after 2030, don't panic. We are not going to close your companies just because projects in 2030 have not been announced yet. But what we see that if we look at the situation before COVID, we were in kind of a plateau. And as soon as we exited the COVID, we started to increase the demand in terms of projects. We were piling up projects like lasagnas. It's what we call internally the lasagna effect. So it's exactly what Jean said before. So you have the normal business that is being done year on year. So that was the level that we showed, and we added it all the events and year on year. So it worked for 4 years between 2020 and 2024. It worked. We see that this level increased. But as we said in the past years, 2024, 2025, it's a kind of a glass ceiling. It's really hard to go higher. So that's the maximum supply chain capacity, and you will see in details what it means afterwards. But when you look at the demand for 26 and 27, you see that we are far above this glass ceiling, and this is by piling up the effects. So like again, lasagnas piling up layers, and now the thing is that the lasagnas are just bigger than the plate, so they will fall down year on year. So what is above the red line, sorry, for 2026 will be partially pushed back to 27, which is already above this line. So it will be pushed to 28, and so on, and so on, and so on. The good news is that we are already with what we have, let's say, in the pipe. We are busy until the end of the decade, not even taking into account the new projects that will be announced afterwards. The first bottleneck in this situation comes from the engineering. And here we extracted the backlogs of 8 big engineering companies, and we compare the situation end of 2019 to end of 2025. We took end of 2019 because that's the last, let's say, clear year before we had all this COVID situation. And if you sum up the backlog of these 8 companies and compared to today, almost increased by 50%. So that's a huge increase, knowing that in between you had the COVID, and some of these companies had, let's say, had hard time already during the COVID period. So the situation is completely different. So each of these companies saw their backlog increasing for various reasons. We can mention, for example, Bechtel that is benefiting from the huge push that there is on LNG, especially with what Jean explained with the Trump effect in US. You have also in the list SBM Offshore, but it's a bit similar for all the shipyards making FPSOs. their book orders is full until they can see. The reason is simple. As I explained again, we need more oil and gas, we need more oil. And to go with more oil, you need huge fields that are usually offshore. And today, an FPSO is the preferred solution versus a traditional offshore plant. So that's why these shipyards are full of orders. And so far, last time we checked, it requires 5 years to train an engineer, then a bit more for these engineers to be ready to work on this project. So the situation will not change within the next month, clearly not. So as long as the market will request that much projects, the situation will remain here bottleneck for these engineering companies. But the thing is that they are not the only one to be a blocking point. The next one are also the supplier itself. And here we extracted some key elements. So we took 3 of them, also from Project Smart Explorer. So if you have access to the tool, you can do the exercise for your product line. Here we took centrifugal compressors, power transformers, and gas turbine. And you see the level for 26 and 27. It's up to the roof. That's what would happen if the projects will be delivered on time. You can clearly understand that this is not what will happen. The manufacturing capacities of centrifugal compressors have not been multiplied by 3 versus last year. It's impossible. All these key OEMs, they have their book order full again for the next 4 years. They are all looking for extra capacity. The thing is, on top of this, what is not reflecting here is the demand that we will have from Middle East when they will have to repair their facilities. As Jean explained, they are not going to wait for the situation to cool down to start the repairs over there. They will want it now. So here that will be put an extra pressure for these long lead items. And these long lead items were traditionally being ordered at the early stage. Now it's even mandatory. That's one of the first things that people are booking for these capacities. And even if we try to increase, or if the manufacturer try to increase the production capacity, you understand that to increase the production capacity of gas turbines, it's a bit more complex than just expanding Amazon warehouse, and it requires time. And anyway, all the extra capacity that they foresee in the next years, the production is already booked. So that will be a big question mark on this future. If you are a manufacturer of centrifugal compressors, transformers, and so on, you know very well the situation because you are directly impacted. If you are not, don't believe that it's not impacting you. It is impacting you. Because when a project is being delayed by 6 months because the centrifugal compressors is delayed by 6 months, everything is delayed by 6 months. You understand that they're probably not going to pile up pumps, valves, and lights if the centrifugal compressors is not there. So that's why keeping this in mind, this difference between what the market wants and what the market has, because behind this, even if we qualify the project, there is an industrial reality. Also, another consequences for that is a change of behavior, especially from the engineering companies. This is what we call the new business model, which is not really new. It was back to what we were doing when my father was still in oil and gas a long time ago, but now it's back to this situation. So just a quick reminder on what we had previously. We used to have a pre-FEED, then a FEED, then an EPC tender, the FID, and then the EPC. So the projects were a bit long because you had these EPC bids in between. And now, more and more, the engineering companies are saying, we don't want to do an EPC bid because that's time and money that is lost and manpower that is used for that we could put actually to something else, to an actual project. So more and more, they say, we do the FEED under the condition that we will also do the EPC. So in that case, the FEED is automatically being converted into EPC, and it changes quite some things. First, the projects are shorter to be commissioned because you don't waste time with the EPC bids. Usually, when you have an EPC bid and you start the EPC, the first thing that they do is to redo the FEED that was done before. It is not the same companies, but when it's automatically converted, the situation is a bit different. Every decision that has been validated at the FEED will not be rediscussed at the EPC, which means that if you wait for the tender to be on your desk, probably it will be too late. So you need to be even more proactive on these projects, to be involved at the feed. You need to adapt your pricing strategy. That's a point that we can also tackle during our workshop with you. And keep in mind that this new business model, it's not marginal. It's actually now the majority. Last year, 55% of the projects were following this new business model. Okay. Now, Jean, if you can maybe have some words on the sovereignty and what it means actually in terms of projects, I'll leave the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. As Jack mentioned, and we already started to discuss at the beginning of the presentation, for a long time we wanted the energy to be cheap and available. Then after COVID, we needed the energy to be cheap, available, and clean. And now we need also this energy to be sovereign. Okay, and so rain means a lot of things. So we say, okay, in practice, where do we see those investment goings, and where we see, I would say, those opportunities. And I would say there were a hard lesson learned from Europe, not to be depending on only one main source of energy. Especially in this case, Russia. And the idea of diversification came up a little bit stronger in 2022, where people start to say, okay, we need to diverse in terms of geography to adapt to the risk. And even for a long time, Middle East was seen as one of the most safe zone for energy on the planet. And the Iran crisis has proved that, I would say, no region were really, I would say, completely immune to the different crises. So, and the problem that behind that, if you are not sovereign and not diversified, clearly you see the price of energy today, which is getting to the roof. That's the case in Europe, but that's also the case in even more maybe in Southeast Asia, where you see prices of energy which are getting completely crazy. So this, I would say, strategy of diversification is pushing for a new project in new regions. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, Africa was really kind of the El Dorado to welcome new investment, especially trying to replace Russia. But we start to see happening now more projects in South America and also in the STAN countries. So, for example, currently Jean-Charles is in Uzbekistan trying to explore the region because we start to see a lot of things happening between Azerbaijan and all this area. So a lot of, I would say, regions which were overlooked because in many cases it was cheaper and simpler to do projects, especially in Middle East. Now that the situation is starting to raise some tension in Middle East, people are back to say, oh, what about we try to invest in other region, trying to change a little bit the game. And it's a real game changer for Guyana and Suriname because most of the region, especially here offshore in front of Guyana, was not explored because of tension with Venezuela, which was claiming, I would say, half of Guyana territorial waters as their own. And of course, it was, I would say, a little bit impeding any exploration or huge program development. Now that I would say the Venezuelan political landscape has changed a little bit, to say the least, of course, it's opening up again the opportunity to do more projects in Guyana because there, of course, Venezuela being less risky, then you have less risk also in Guyana and Suriname. So it's pushing to do more projects in the region. So you see how much I would say the different situation happening all over the planet are opening doors or closing doors on other regions. But what is quite clear, and if you are discussing with banks also, that there is a clear risk mitigation strategy today through diversification in geography, and not only geography but diversification also of not only production but transportation. And here, what is quite clear is that there is a lot going on about the transportation and distribution of energy as of today. As I was mentioning, the STAN countries are quite interesting because last week, for example, just to take Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan started to deliver gas to Germany. And honestly, it's not an easy task because you needed to connect three different, I would say, pipeline networks to do so, and to pass through all Turkey, Bulgaria, etc., and go back to Germany. And it was something that could have been done for, I would say, decades, but was not done because, of course, it was simpler to buy directly from Russia. But as of today, of course, the emergency pushing everybody to do it, we see Azerbaijan starting to put in place all the action and through all those different countries to be able to connect by to Russia. To give you an idea, this week Azerbaijan has also signed a deal with Japan to be able to export oil to Japan. Okay, so you see they are passing on both sides, which is also I find quite fascinating. But that's not the only route of energy which are being developed. We have, for example, the Arctic Road that was, of course, the path of LNG tankers north of Russia is now open all year long, almost. And Russian are making sure that this road is staying open to be able to export back to India and being able to export back to China as well. You see some route, for example, the pipeline in Saudi east-west, which was built decades ago, which was more or less never used before, which is now running full load because of the Hormuz Canal, and people are starting to discuss to double this pipeline in terms of capacity. And if you take Middle East, they are all discussing today to see, okay, where they can double up on their pipeline or build new pipeline to be able to, I would say, escape this trap of the Hormuz Strait. So there is clearly an addition in terms of opportunities into the transportation solution. Can be pipeline, can be tankers, can be terminals. And if we look at just pipeline, few example, I mean, today we're talking about huge programs, Power of Siberia to go from Yamal to go back to China, and we're just a little bit short of 7,000 kilometers, which is quite crazy when you think about it. But it's not the only one, because you have, for example, a project to make a gas pipeline from Nigeria back to Morocco, and to Nigeria also from to Algeria, one offshore, one onshore, which are, I would say, in crazy range as well. Not sure if those projects will materialize, but of course, given the situation today, trying to push for sovereignty of the energy, those pipelines have, I would say, some echo around the market. And then we see some projects which are even more pragmatic. For example, the Alaska LNG pipeline, which has been in Project Smart Explorer for, I would say, almost 6 or 7 years, which is going back, I would say, to the active mode, because of course there is such a thirst for LNG today that it's starting to be profitable to build up this project, even though it was not the case for, I would say, 10 or 15 years. So those new routes are, I would say, taking some momentum. Why? Because there is such an emergency, and the security of energy is calling for those new, I would say, escape and distribution system of energy. The third aspect of this sovereignty is local production electrification. Okay, it's quite simple to think about it, but one way to become more sovereign into your energy is to import less. Okay, especially as Europeans. And here you have two strategies as we see it. First one is to produce fossil energy locally. And here, one of the main, I would say, vector of it, especially in Central Europe, but also in US at some point, or in South America, was to produce biofuel and biogas. Mostly from, I would say, local project driven by farmers, where the idea is to create value from their bio waste, can be from animals, but also from, I would say, more wood or cereals, etc. The problem with those projects that they are not really at the industrial scale, so they are not always connected to the gas network, etc. But okay, it can represent quite a big fraction of the market, because in countries like France or Germany, they are thinking to go in the range of 5% of the gas production, sometimes 10% of the global of the country production of gas made locally. So it's not something marginal anymore, and it's something you can really try to implement to balance a little bit your dependency on those imports. The second strategy is also to reopen former fields. That's that's a discussion which is going on in Norway, also in Netherlands with Groningen field, for example, which was closed a few years back for political reason. And the idea was to say, okay, given the emergency as of today, should we reopen it also? UK was also discussing it. I'm not sure it will happen, but okay, you see that people are starting to move a little bit on those decisions from a few years back. And also the idea is to explore new, I would say, fossil energy like white hydrogen or gas coming from former coal mine, especially in Europe, but not only in Europe. We start to see it also happening in China. And the second, I would say, strategy trying to import less is to turn to electricity or geothermal. Well, if you turn to electricity, you have to be under the situation where you have a surplus of renewable or nuclear. Okay, if you turn to electricity but you need to import more gas, to be honest, it's not really worth it. But if you are in one of the situations where you have a surplus of renewable or nuclear energy, then of course electrification can be quite interesting. And that's why, like for geothermal, we see the national government driving strategies, huge strategy for electrification and geothermals campaign. First exploration, but also now starting to get into the implementation of this project to make sure that it's starting to happen more and more, and also trying to reduce those importation. For example, on the left, we start to show you from Project Smart Explorer the volume of investment into biofuels, biogas, and electrification. And you see from more or less zero, it has raised to the figure of 15 billion per year, which is already quite a lot of money. And as soon as you put a new crisis into the environment and global ecosystem, of course, it puts more, I would say, benefit and more value into those projects of biofuel and electrification as well. So now what's next? And Jack, I leave you the floor because we are not short of ideas on those topics.
Yes. First, we don't have a crystal ball, and second, don't panic, even for especially for the next slide. The first one, we try to, let's say, pinpoint three points that could be a blocker. The first one, I think it's on everybody's mind. It's the situation in Taiwan. We even put on the map on the left the military exercise that China did. In blue, you have 2022 and 2024, and in red, the drills that they made last year in 2025. And you can see it's looking like a blockade. When I say it's on everybody's radar, I think it is. Even US tried to anticipate it, and they recently voted what they call the Protect Taiwan Act. Basically, not to enter in all the details, it would ban quite almost automatically China from all the major international financial agencies, and will make them completely difficult to have a let's say commercial trade. So I think that situation is quite well foreseen. We tried also to look at another strait. So far, no panic. There is no tension on this plate, but it's quite similar to the Strait of Hormuz, in a way that I believe 3 months back in time, nobody was knowing where the Strait of Hormuz was. I mean, nobody except you all of us, because we work in the energy, but from everybody else, Strait of Hormuz was not really known. Now everybody can put that on the map. And we isolated one strait that could be a bit similar, because the Malacca Strait, that is in between Indonesia and Malaysia. And here you have almost all of the maritime transit that is going to China, Japan, and Korea that is passing through this strait. So the strait is way bigger than the Strait of Hormuz. It's almost 1,000 kilometers long, nearly 950 kilometers long. So far, there are no tension. But if this situation happened to be modified for whatever reason, this could be a big problematic, especially for China, and putting high tension then on the global market. The third scenario that potentially could also be one of a major crisis is an embargo on some minerals. I think also Trump made that clear that the rare earth elements are now vital and are, as the rest, important for the nations and the governments. So if we happen to have unfriendly policies on these rare elements, or even on copper or on steel, this could also create some crisis. The thing that we need to keep in mind is that every time there is a crisis, there is an opportunity behind, because we need to adapt the system to the current situation. Now, don't make me say what I didn't say. I'm not saying that we need these elements to drive business. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that when there is a crisis, somewhere the sun is shining somewhere else, and the system is not something that is fixed. We saw that in the past, especially with the situation in Russia. It will most probably happen in the future. It will need to be adapted again to whatever is coming next. Looking at the future, and Jean mentioned a part of that, in order to be less dependent is to be more sovereign. And one of the elements that is starting to be on everybody's radar are the SMR, so the small modular reactors. It's not happening again next week, but we are getting closer and closer to a potential industrial scale. Most of the pilots that will be more important are reaching a size of 250 megawatts, and they should be live 2030, 2032, depending on the delay on these constructions. They have some smaller pilot. I believe also there is one smaller in pilot that will be delivered in China before, but it's too small so far to be interesting. That the size that we foresee to be quite interesting for an industrial scale is at least 250 as a pilot. The three reasons why everybody is looking at SMR. The first one is that this produce green electricity, like renewables. It's produce stable electricity, not so much like renewables. Remember the Spanish blackout, it was not so long ago, but that's one of the big advantage of SMRs. Second advantage, it's a decentralized energy, so you can put it wherever you want. And what we also expect on the later stage is that solution to be quickly scalable, and so you can choose the size that you want depending on your needs. And the needs that we've foreseen so far, they are mainly, let's say, divided in two categories. The first one will be as a pure energy transition part, let's say, where you could replace coal or oil fire power plants with an SMR. So when you electrify this, the gain that you have in carbon footprint is absolutely massive. On the later stage, so even further from that, we could expand SMRs to be installed in maritime, and here to have an electrical boat, if I may say, and here we'll also be reducing the carbon footprint that we are having on the planet. Second pillar is to use the decentralized aspect of these SMRs and to put it wherever we need. So first, near the industrial complex, because this industrial complex, they want to decarbonate themselves. One of the easiest way, I would say, with some points, is to electrify that. But in order to electrify an industrial complex, you can guess it's more complex than just putting the Nespresso machine up to the power. You need high volume of electricity, and SMR could answer that. The second thing for this electricity demand is to absorb all the data centers and AI demand. We are not going into the details on that specific topic. We'll have some news to share on the next weeks. Today, it's quite hard to forecast what will be the demand in electricity for data center, especially and AI. These companies, they don't even know what their product will be able to make in 2 years. So to ask them what will be their electricity demand in 10 years, they have no clue. The only thing that we know is that the demand of electricity will be skyrocketing, and SMR could answer this solution. So why it's on everybody's radar, even if it's not for tomorrow, we are talking about 2030, 2032. We already see some projects waiting for the evolution of SMRs to see if that make an advantage for them. Because if you want today to decarbonate your facility, waiting 5 years for the first SMR to come on the market, that's something that you can wait. It's different situation that it was 15 years ago, where SMR was far, far away. Okay. So now the situation evolved. Last slide that we wanted to share with you before jumping to the conclusion and to the first question that you might have is try to anticipate or try to foresee what will happen if we solve the current crisis that we have. And the two crises that we have currently is the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, and obviously the one in Iran. So the first one between Russia and Ukraine, we can expect a reduction of the oil price. It will not be divided by 2, but it will be in the ballpark of $10 of a reduction. There will be a reduction in the price for the gas, especially for Europe, because this situation is highly impacting Europe. We can forecast that Europe will buy again some gas to Russia. To what extent, hard to say today. Probably not at the level it was before the war, but I think that some pipes will be reactivated and some connection will be made again. And finally, it will slow down a bit the global inflation. On the second conflict in Iran, if the solution is being solved here, the consequences will be more global. The barrel price will go down. Again, not to the situation it was before the war when it was at $60, $62 the barrel. Most probably it will be in the region of $70 for the barrel. And you will have a wave of opportunities of projects because they will need to repair everything. They are already starting, as Jean explained, to work, especially from the engineering side. As soon as they can start the reconstruction, they will do. So that will create a wave of opportunities for you. So if you're already involved or if you were involved in this installation in the past, most probably you will have new orders to repair what has been destroyed over there. On the other hand, the LNG export will not go back to their normal site immediately afterwards. Reconstructing an LNG train is a bit more complex than just some Lego bricks. It will take months, potentially years, to go back to the normal situation that as before. We will have some insurance costs that will still remain quite high, meaning the price of the projects will also increase in Middle East to this risk that potentially will be permanent or at least will last for some years. Of course, here I describe the situation, which is the most probable one where the situation doesn't change politically in Iran. If Iran is opening as a market, the scenario will be different, but we will have time to make an update on this and exchange with you on this specific subject. Before moving to the Q&A, Jean, maybe just a quick summary of what we said today, what we need to keep in mind, and then we'll open the questions. So if you already have some question in mind, don't hesitate to ask them in the chat. We will answer them one by one.
Yes, thank you, Jack. And just before jumping to the question, I mean, we try to enlighten some phenomena, some I would say movement happening on our business. Of course, it's a bit more complex than what we try to explain and try to put numbers behind, because everybody sees a trend where it's moving or not. Putting figures are a little bit more complex, and of course, we have deep models, complex model behind, and we try to explain them to give you the maximum of information. But what is at the core of the situation is what geopolitical crises are succeeding every 2 years almost now, and they are putting, I would say, an additional pressure and putting a lot of projects in jeopardy as well. If you look at from pure number of opportunities, those crises are fueling volumes of project opportunities, because each time you have a new crisis, our system is trying to adapt to it, and to adapt to it, you need more infrastructure, you need more midstream, you need more production, diversification, etc. So looking from the numbers, of course, it's putting more opportunities out there. The problem that as of today, if we look from 2026 and the 2-3 next years coming up, we have a ratio of 45% of the project which are motivated by either geopolitical or sovereignty reasons, sometimes both. And here it's quite clear that it's a lot. It's a massive volume of project which is motivating. And the problem that, as we said at the beginning, there is already a pipeline of projects which are made just to maintain the volume of energy production and increase it a little bit, meaning that the pipeline is almost full. So when you add this extra brick, which is almost the same size as the normal brick on top of it, is leading to a situation where we are going to have project arbitrage. And of course, in this situation, which project will come the fastest is a big question mark. It's a $1 million question. But if we put some example, imagine a situation today, you're a compressor manufacturer who has more, I would say, incentive and I would say budget to buy you your compressor. Is it a brand new project in Africa, or is it a project in Qatar trying to go back live? So of course, you can imagine who has the biggest budget and who will have the priority in equipment, and I would say also in engineering. So most likely, and not it will not be true everywhere, but priority will be given to the project where you are tackling either a reparation problem, or if you are participating to this kind of security of energy, sovereignty of energy, which of course is always an exercise of risk mitigation. The only problem that those projects don't create a lot of value, but will consume most of the supply chain capacity because, as Jack mentioned, even though we adapt by standardization with a new business model, etc., there is also a constraint over the engineering companies and the long lead item where there is a limitation to what can be done. And we will reach this limit. We are already reaching it. So now the question mark is how much as a supply chain, and I would say over layers, but also sub-suppliers of those people can adapt and push themselves in the best situation to take advantage of those opportunities and situation to make sure that you are bidding on project where you are sure to win, or at least you have the best chance of winning and getting the order on time delivered. Okay, and that's where of course we will be happy to help you through Project Smart Explorer, because for each project we indicate you if the project has the highest risk of being on time, or if the project will be delayed, etc., etc.